The art of Iain Cheesman isn't just unique to New Zealand, it's kind of unique to anywhere in the world. His practice is quite fascinating and it is uniquely his. Art doesn't necessarily need to have all the answers, and in the work of Iain Cheesman, you're going to get lots and lots of questions.
I used to be an engineer and went to art school for the first year in York, and I did a whole lot of interdisciplinary types of art making, and then I went to Dunedin and did painting, so I studied as a painter. And partway through my degree I realised actually I should have done sculpture. However, I was already thinking like a painter, so when I make sculpture today I think about painting and the painterliness of colour and the layering, etc, etc. So when you see the work behind me, the layering of the felt and the colours, I think like a painter when I'm making it. So in a lot of my artwork is words and language, and that comes from me as a writer. I've written poetry for most of my life, not a lot of good poetry, but recently I've just published a book of poetry, and I made a body of work from that poetry book. And language has always been in my work. I think it's from people like Colin McCann in New Zealand, the language was put on the face of a painting. It becomes part of, sort of part of the language of communication, which is important in art. For my artwork, because I did my first year in York in England, I was looking at a lot of international artists when I was probably at my sort of most interested in what art was. And I've never kind of forgotten that international ideal, I guess, in some ways. And when I came back to New Zealand, kind of looked through a lot of New Zealand artists, and the parochial side of art making in New Zealand, I didn't want to take part in that. So I do always think about how would this look, how would this feel to someone, a visitor to New Zealand? How would they respond to it? And I guess it's part of, as an artist, you want to try and maybe affect or change or interest the most people you can. Humour in my work is, like the words, the language is a really important facet to it. Sometimes I touch on quite serious topics, be it sort of humanity or aspects of humanity about war or whatever it is. And I have found that I can't avoid putting a bit of humour in there. And it is a deliberate act as well. It's such that to unnerve or disable a viewer with humour and then maybe smack them around the head a little bit with the reality of who we are as people, humanity. So it's really important. And also the whole seriousness of the art world is, to me, sometimes a comedy. And if I'm going to take part in that comedy, then I should be maybe telling the odd joke. So, yeah. Yeah, so for 2018, one of the projects I'm working on is a larger sculpture with Scott and the Vivian, and that will be a realisation of some of my smaller welded PVC works, which at the beginning were standalone works, but they've also been like little maquettes for larger works. And so the realisation of one of these small things is going to happen this year. And I know what the word is going to be and the shape of it, but it's a secret. But it will be seriously a bit of a jokey work. on a big scale. So for the next show at the Vivian, Exodus, is a group show. I'm showing a work called Signs of Earlier, and that's for the Exodus exhibition. And it's probably the largest, I wouldn't say largest work, it's the most comprehensive installation work I've made for some time. And it's one piece in its entirety. And that is I've worked with timber and felt, and I was looking at the idea of the abandonment of a space where objects were made and people had lived. Now, we don't know who they are or when they lived or the age of it, but the sense that they're not there anymore, but they might come back. So it's loaded with symbolism from painting as well, and objects which are sort of, it could be a number of things. So there's some obscure things and there's some very, very much some identified objects known to us. It comes from an anecdotal story in some ways, and my wife Sarah and I were in England. We were up in Suffolk. We were walking and bird watching, and we were walking through an oak and elm forest, and we could smell smoke, and we followed the smoke to a clearing, and there was a fire there and an old tyre surround, and there were tools and there were shave horses and no people, but we could hear them in the distance. So I went into the clearing because I saw these shave horses and I'd wanted to make one, so I got my cell phone out and I was taking a photo, and Sarah was freaking out that we were in someone's space that we weren't supposed to be, and they were going to come back. They came back and I had to do a lot of talking, but they relaxed with me, and they told me what they were up to, and they were running a training exercise for unemployed people working in the bush. So that whole sense of fear, anxiety, desire was all in that one place when we were on holiday, and so I wanted to kind of recreate in a different way that kind of sense of abandonment, but inevitable return. With my artwork, I think it's probably because of my engineering background that as an engineer we used to use a lot of different materials in one space, be it copper, PVC, cable tray, all of those different things, and then you're working with other trades. To me, materials and tools and objects were an important part of my life. So in my sculptural practice, I use a wide varied range of materials, be it from soft felt and PVC rod to concrete, steel sometimes. So I have a variety of materials which I use like a painter's toolbox, I guess, in terms of things. It's important to me that I use different materials all the time, and that way it keeps a freshness with my artwork. I think it's important for me to keep moving, and I don't like really staying in the one spot for very long, my personality.